Hello, everybody. What's going on? It's so nice to see you. We got Lewis in the house who's coming. Lewis, you normally co-host with me, but you are in Vegas.
I am, but I'm not sitting at the craps table. So I'm right beside you. I'm going to be involved in the call. I just maybe muted it a few times, so I'm not interrupting yourself or Frank and anyone else that's going to be speaking. But I'm ready to go, and I'm very excited for tonight.
Perfect. Let's see who else. Hey, Mike, good to see you. I know Vincent's in the house. He's on our leadership team. Jay Deep, dude? You look like you're sitting in the Batmobile. And we have Mose here, and a number of you with your cameras off. If at all possible, now I know that some of you are driving, some of you are doing things that you should not be sharing with the general public. But if you are sitting at your table or you're able to turn your camera on or in any way, please do so. Hey, Maureen, I see you're out for a walk. Is that with your pooch? Yeah, there's the dog. Um, so yes, it just helps us because there's a real live person on this side of the Zoom call. We're all such connectors, so we really like to see people and talk to people. Anyway, Lewis, you and I are just coming off of an event that Real Estate Wealth Labs sponsored over the weekend called the Unnamed 2024 Conference. And I don't know about you, but I think it went better than even I hoped it would. And I've got high standards.
I think it was a fantastic success. There are a ton of people that joined us there, and we were able to accomplish our mission of sharing a lot of great insights for entrepreneurs, real estate investors, and just business owners alike on how to move forward, what actions we need to take, knowing that we're not alone. We all suffer from the same types of problems and issues and, things holding us back. So I think a ton of people got tremendous value out of it. And a lot of folks are already asking about next year. So it was definitely a fine success. So if you're on the call and you were in attendance, thank you. And if you were not able to make it, then, we're hoping to see you next year in 2025.
Absolutely. In fact, if you were there, just throw it in the chat. Say I was there or something like that. I know JD was there. I don't know about the others, but we actually didn't. It was a different group. But what I found interesting is that all of us were somehow connected to real estate, even though we were in different types of businesses and entrepreneurship endeavors, so to speak. Anyway, let's get the show on the road, shall we? Thanks, JD. The let's get this show on the road. One of the things that all of us that is common with every great business, when I look at great businesses, one of the questions they constantly wrestle with is what is actually true, what is actually happening in the market. I was talking to a client of mine recently, and they said, I asked them, what problem do you solve? And they told me the problem, and I said, who told you that was a problem? It amazes me that we just hear what somebody else says, or we hear it through social media, or we think that our problem is the same for everybody else. One of the greatest challenges, especially for real estate investors today, is to be able to get at what is actually true, what is actually happening in the market. Because there seems to be a lot of noise out there, a lot of data, and how do you curate it? How do you understand it? There's a difference between information, knowledge, and wisdom. And boy, are we in today because we've got Frank Fallico in the house. This guy can talk about real estate when he is not talking. Word is that when he sees one of those, he does what do they call that? The Rorschach test, the ink blot test. All he sees are properties every time. That's what I've heard. Anyway, before we bring Frank in on this, I'm going to share my screen and do some housekeeping stuff really fast. So this, Lewis, I can see you on my screen. Can you tell me you can see exploring real estate opportunities. Where should I be looking? This is one of the questions that we're going to look at. Remember, just a minute ago, I said it's really hard for us to figure out what is actually happening in the market. Today, we want to talk about what is happening. Where should you be looking? What do the opportunities look like? What is happening in the seller's psychology, so to speak, and in the buyer's psychology? So that's what we're doing today. Now, well, I just explained to you our agenda. This is our entire rule team. And if you want to take a snapshot of this, you can. Not all of us are on the call. I know Vincent Sundar, our Chief Technology Officer, is on this call. Ken, I believe, is coming in. He has some commitments and he'll be coming in, but he won't be involved in the call. Kyle Guthro had, we're all real estate investors and he had something show up, so he'll be coming in late, if at all. But otherwise, Lewis and I and Frank are here, and we're going to rock this thing. So a couple of things about myself. I'm the Chief Leadership Officer for REWL. If those of you who know me know that while I do real estate investing, multifamily, and coaching and consulting, what I'm obsessed with is investor leadership, in how you lead yourself, how you lead the people around you, because everything rises and falls. And I'm borrowing words from, I believe it's Bill Hybels, who said, everything rises and falls on leadership. So that's what I'm about. Lewis, you want to talk about, in 30 seconds, what you're about?
Thanks, Niran. Hey, everyone. Good to see you this evening. So I've been in real estate for approximately 14 years, investing in the Ontario marketplace. I've been in construction for approximately 25 years. And that experience stems from, residential, multifamily type properties, a lot of different commercial properties as well. And over this time, it has allowed me to identify a lot of, opportunities in the marketplace, and combined with the construction experience has given me a great deal of advantage of finding properties that are in need of some type of a repair, taking advantage of that and holding long-term or selling, and it's lent itself quite well. So that's kind of what I'm about in 30 seconds. Thank you, Niran.
You're welcome. Frank, I'm going to bring Frank back in a minute, and we'll do an introduction there. You feel free to take a snapshot of this. This is our legal disclaimer. Real Estate Wealth Lab does not provide any investment advice. Real Estate Wealth Lab does provide forward-looking information. Any information that expresses market predictions, expectations, beliefs, plans, projects, you can read it yourself. But the bottom line is that if you are going to do an investment, make an investment, please consult qualified licensed professionals. Upcoming events, just a quick snapshot. Feel free to take a picture of this. February 14th, we'll be doing our members only mastermind. And then on the 28th, making informed choices, proper property selection. Lewis and I will be hosting that, and we will most probably have a guest. We're waiting on confirmation. All right. Now I am going to stop my share. All right, let's do it this way. There we go. We are back. Frank, why don't we bring you on our screen? There you are.
Yes, you can
Frank
hear me okay?
Fallico. We can. I know that you have a reputation of not just being a rock star real estate agent, but also knowing what is going on. You definitely have the pulse on the market, what is going on in real time, what is happening on the streets. Most importantly, Frank, my impression of you every time I meet you is that you're just present in the moment. And most of all, you deeply seem to care about the people you deal with. Like you are in. And you're the kind of guy that I would not just would I go to you for a transaction, but I'd go to you to have a coffee or a beer with. Because you fit in like an old dirty shirt, so to speak. Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit now? I've heard rumors that you are approaching rock star status.
Well, let me tell you, first off, coming from an individual as yourself, that's like a really high compliment. And those that know me best know that humility is probably one of my a precursor of how I just live my life. Doesn't matter how big or how small, we all put on our pants one leg at a time, so to speak. And on the rockstar part, a lot of people ask me about, how I got into real estate, what are my connections to that world. And I can tell you, for those that know me best, know that, my first provocation in life was centered around music, following your passion. So in 1999, I was nominated for a Juno. Later that year, we ended up with a gold record as a producer. And again, not in any way to brag to the group, but just I get sometimes these kind of calls can be somewhat monotonous. So I'm all about like jazz, excitement, about things that make you feel like you're living. And what I loved about music was the freedom of what it provided. And a lot of people say, well, Frank, how the heck did you leave music, end up in real estate? And I can tell you that it's because of my passion that I left music. And my number one passion is seeking freedom. So the higher I went up the totem pole, somebody's like, you got a gold record, you got this. But that industry had a way of making you feel like you had to fit in a box in order to continue going up that totem pole. And what I loved about real estate is kind of the flip side. There is no box. The most truest sense of what I feel a lot of compelling people that I work with, and I think a lot of those people might even be on this call, is that do you have the ability to jump off a cliff and have enough confidence to build a glider or an airplane on the way down? That's like, to me, the most truest sense of entrepreneurism or seeking that freedom. I mean, like, I don't know how it's going to exactly work out, but I have enough confidence in myself. And if I'm being totally honest, because I don't want it to come off arrogantly, it's not really confidence in myself that I believe in. I kind of believe in the people that I've surrounded myself over the course of my life that give me the confidence that I have, whether it's my wife, my relationship with my parents, my relationship with the people on my team, people on, the Real Estate Wealth Lab, when I met Richard Dolan, we go back almost a decade and a half. All that kind of stuff is what gives me that confidence. So I don't want to, make this about me, because it really isn't. Like, people kind of tuned in to understand the market, but just to give you a sense of why I'm so passionate about it is because it gives me freedom, freedom to be with my family, with my kids. And the amount of people that I meet in real estate that want to get in, that don't have that freedom, is what kind of encourages me. So, like, to summarize it, even though we're realtors and we do a lot of that kind of stuff, we're really in the, and it's our slogan too, we're in the changing lives game. I kind of feel like if you meet me and our team and we're working together, if I haven't changed your life in a positive way, transaction or not, like whether you buy, sell, or you don't do anything, then we failed. That's our number one goal. It's just like, can we impact your life in a positive way to affect a change that puts you in a better place? And you turn around and say, hey, I'm the better for it because I met these guys. And I'm sure, for me, that's why I work with, Real Estate Wealth Lab individuals as well. We share that kind of common genes. So without further ado, we're going to get, I'm going to share my screen and get into.
Before you do,
yes.
Before you do, I want to just highlight a couple things. One, I think often we come into these calls and it is, I have seen your deck.
Gotcha.
And I know the information onslaught that is approaching us. I know that from you, right? So before we go there, I want to ask you a couple of personal questions. If that's okay with you. Just, I want to know, I know that you love music. So do you sing, do you play, or do you produce? Where are you in that?
So I started off actually as a rapper, as an MC.
What?
Yeah. I was nominated in 1999. I was nominated as a rapper. But I mean, if I go back a bit, I was trained as a real young age at the Conservatory for Music, ended up playing jazz. I was in the concert band. We did a lot of stuff. But again, what I loved about it most is, try and get into a debate with somebody about who's better, Queen or the Stones, Dr. Dre or Timberland, Biggie or Tupac. The conversations around music are so nuanced that it's what creates that passion. And real estate has some of that, right? You walk into a house and try and convince somebody that this house is better than that house. The conversations are so nuanced that's the beauty of anything involved with, whether it's food, the arts, that kind of stuff is, fashion, you name it. Whatever that passion is that drives you, you can apply that to your existence, whatever you're doing. That's kind of the way I approach my world. But
awesome.
Yeah. And poetry to me is always a big thing, right? The way we put words together influence people's thinking. And rappers, the great ones, are able to do that, right? How they put words together influences thinking.
So one final question before we move into the real estate. Les Paul or Fender?
Les Paul.
Oh, my man.
There you go.
There you go. I've got a blue Les Paul sitting right over there. So
And I didn't even know that. See, to me, Les Paul, that's it. That one's simple.
that one's simple. All right, let's jump right in.
Okay, so I'm
into
gonna share. Obviously, the main reason why we all got here, and I'm going to share, at least qualify where we're coming from with this. You know, our decisions are only as good as the information that we seek and the people we surround ourselves with. That's kind of what I tried to share with you guys. And what I'm going to qualify here is this is just an excerpt of what we do pretty well every Monday morning at our real estate firm, Harvey Callis, with about 90 agents. And sometimes people say, well, you know, how did you end up there? You know, Harvey Callis does about 4.6 billion in sales. You know, yes, you know, we're in the top 1% of 75,000 agents out there, but I don't share that in any way, again, to be, you know, presumptuous or anything like that. It's just to make you understand that we always seek whoever's the best in the business, and we want to be the low man on that totem pole. So I'm going to encourage you guys all. And what I'm going to try and do with these slides, again, because I'm one of those guys that I hate slides too. I'm going to try and make it as interesting or at least pivotal as possible. And I kind of picked what I know is kind of happening in real time, right? So starting here, I don't like to play around with a lot of numbers, even though we look at them constantly, but this is going to be a reoccurring theme as we speak, guys, that the number that I look at in 2022 to 23 at the tail end, and obviously we're in 24 now, this is what happened at the end of December. This is probably the most significant number for me, which is a really high number, which is the number of active listings is sitting at 19.3% increase. That's a lot of property, a lot of inventory that hasn't quite moved. If you look at all the other numbers, not a big deal, right? Average price year over year is only up 3.2%, kind of stable. But this number kind of jumped out at me to say, okay, where are we heading in 2024? I got to be aware, just from a fundamental perspective, that a lot of listings have been sitting there. That's almost like an alarm bell for anybody on this call. That means that there's still a lot of really good buying opportunities for any sellers that might potentially be desperate that have been sitting with inventory for a little while. Going in a little further here, you know, people are kind of asking me, okay, what are the averages? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. If you need to take a snapshot of it, by all means. But the one that jumped out at me here is while everything else is even, the townhomes for some reason have really jumped up quite a bit in the 416 and 905. So you can see year over year what these numbers are looking like. I'm going to go into this next slide because I think this is probably the most important thing that I'm seeing. People are asking me, friends, family, Frank, what are you thinking? So I look at a slide like this, and what jumps out at me most in this slide is that in 2001, guys, if I can draw your attention to 2001, the top of the slide here, the amount of transactions in the GTA were 67,000. If you look at the bottom, the amount of transactions in the GTA were 65,000. So 67 to 65,000. At that time in 2001, when we hit that number, we were only sitting at about 2.7 million people. So what does that really mean? Well, in 2001, we had a major global event. And you're going to see that this is a reoccurring theme for me. A great mentor kind of shared this with me years and years ago, which is if you're going to get involved in real estate, and at that time I wasn't even in real estate, but they were telling me something that I think if you're going to take something away from this is you need to be paying attention to what's happening globally. You need to pay attention to what's happening nationally. And then you need to pay attention to what's happening locally. And then you need to determine if any of those three things are going to have an impact on your business. Now, obviously 9/11, 2001, that's why the number was so low. So we start looking, okay, well, why is the number so low in 2023? What's been happening, right? So you can see here, our population in 2023, guys, is sitting at 6.4 million in the GTA. So we have 4 million more people, give or take. Lowest number in 22 years. What's happening? So to me, that's already a red flag saying to me, okay, in 2023, a lot of people that would have bought or were likely to buy or could have bought simply didn't because something was going on for them. And the number's big enough for us to kind of pay attention. And if you see this column here, you can see that the numbers in 2021 were quite high at 121,000, 75,000. And I'm leaving for now the average price, which is in this column. But keep this as a beacon because I'm going to tell you where it's heading as we, you know, pursue this conversation. So I'm going to spend a little time here because this is really, in order for us to understand where we're heading, I kind of have to, and this is what we always do as a team. We look at what's happened in the recent past to kind of determine where we're heading. Well, in January, February, and March, we were hitting the highest numbers that the GTA has ever seen in average pricing. 1.3 million and change in February, you can see March. But by April, when that first interest rate increase occurred, you can see that it already had a significant drop in the numbers. So from March to April, the transactions went from about 10,000 to 8,000, and the price dropped. And then, accordingly, if you look at it, month after month, with every increase, the volume started to drop and the prices started to drop. Well, obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that part out, but a lot of people were just not paying attention to this. And that's how some folks got caught at the tail end of 2022 and 23 on where the numbers were going. But this is one of the preeminent reasons why the volume in sales in 2023 ended up where they were. You could see that this was still a generally healthy year because of the action at the top. But by the end of December, we were sitting at $1,050,000 as far as the average price had come down, and the transactions in December were really, really low. As we move into 2023, we haven't had as much interest movement, but as you can see, the volume impact had its effect, and we didn't really put up decent numbers. Why is this relevant? Okay, so let's, in practical sense, at the top of this call, I kind of mentioned we have 75,000 agents. There's only 65,000 transactions in a fiscal year. That means most agents aren't even going to do one deal a year. So the advice that they're giving other people isn't really that great because they're not in enough transactions to really know where anything is going. So that's something to always pay attention to. But more importantly, I look at the real estate market almost like going to a restaurant, guys, if I can give you that analogy. If you show up at a really good restaurant around 5:30 and all the tables are empty, you're going to turn to your wife or your loved one and say, hey, you know what, we're good, we're going to get a table. And then before you know it, you show up at dinner time around 7:30, and now they're all full. Toronto GTA market has kind of been like that for as long as I can remember. Buyers all of a sudden stop buying, they think nothing's happening, and then it starts to creep on them real quick. And the key is to not get caught in that momentum, right? So this slide here just kind of gives you a sense of, obviously, the dip from February high 2022 to where we are now. And I'm going to tell you where I'm going with this, because this is the other thing that we look at as a team all the time. We start to look at the net in migration, because that's another major component to the stuff that we're talking about. Now, in 2022, this is how many people entered the GTA. This slide, if you need to take a shot, by all means. But 2023, again, was really healthy. In fact, there was an increase. So mathematically, we start looking at this, again, like a beacon telling me the numbers went down as far as sales, but we still have a heck of a lot of people that entered the city. How did these numbers go down? So obviously those buyers are going to jump in sooner or later. I don't have a crystal ball on that, of course. But again, I'm just looking at fundamentals that are going to kind of teach me on where perhaps we might be going. And how close is the correlationship? Well, here's the graph on price versus net in migration. It almost follows it, to a T, right? So if you want to understand like where your price is going, you look at your net in migration, and before you know it, you start painting a picture. This is superimposed, right? The bars below is giving you the net immigration, and the line above obviously is the pricing. So a direct correlation to, and if you guys need to stop me, ask a question, by all means.
Frank, on this graph, to me, it looks like in some spots, the pricing is a leading indicator of population as well. Like there seems to be a lag there between both of those two.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. And I'll tell you guys, I say this, again, with great humility. I don't want to sound arrogant, but what I think for the most part is missing from most industries, and real estate's a big one. I call it observational intelligence or observational IQ, right? You've heard emotional IQ, you've heard regular IQ. What do I mean by that? We're stuck in a world where so many of us are on our gadgets, on our phones, all of us, that there's times that we used to not have these gadgets in our hands. The average person sat idle a bit more and would just observe things a bit better. Now we're being fed a lot of things. So if you're on TikTok or you're on Instagram, you're on social media, the algorithms understand us and they feed us exactly what we already want to know or need to know or have been begging to know. But what they don't give us is things that are outside our natural spectrum of desires. So if I was, let's say, a 19-year-old kid on a bus and I wasn't on my phone, I'm forced now to observe the world around me in a different way, simply because I'm not being force-fed certain things. So one of the things that I try and encourage people that I work with is to understand, like, what things can you observe that will help you paint a picture? This is what we do as a team. We go on and we start looking at numbers and say, well, what can we extract out of observations that we're seeing that might make us a little bit more observationally intelligent, so that when we're speaking to our clients, that they feel, okay, these guys aren't just trying to hustle us and sell us something. Like, there's a real understanding of what it means to have this kind of wisdom around decision making. So what am I observing? Okay, 2024. I don't expect everyone to read this, but this is a big deal. The government is going to be slashing student visas to our country by half. So 50% of the visas are going to be cut. What does that mean? Well, I don't know if you see this box here, but in 2023, to give you an understanding, just in India, there were 3 million students that ended up in Canada on student visas. That's a really big number, guys. Like, we're not talking, and that's just India. We're not talking about China, Middle East, like a lot of groups that are coming to our country. So when the government makes an announcement like this is one of those I need to pay attention to moments, because a lot of these students end up in the GTA, eventually buy or rent something, and this could be a major factor. So when people say to me, okay, Frank, what to expect? This is one of the, token points that we're going to be paying attention to. What else are we looking at? Okay, so this analogy I like, because I'm assuming, and I, share a compliment to the entire group. Those that are on this call, I already feel are like astute, otherwise they wouldn't be here on a Wednesday evening. They can do anything with their time. So a great mentor of mine once said, like, if you're a real estate investor or you're a specialist in any field, you have to understand that even though you're driving a really fast car or really nice car, you could be stuck in the same traffic jam, and all of a sudden, it doesn't matter that you're driving a Ferrari and the guy next to you is driving something lesser. You can't go any faster and you can't do anything. So that little piece of advice has served me so well over the years, because I sometimes deal with, builders, other people that have a lot of knowledge about the industry. They feel like they're in a real fast car and they should be doing better, but they're simply not, because they don't understand that it wasn't the knowledge or the thing that they have that's holding them back. Maybe they should have taken a different route. Maybe they should have looked at the process. Maybe they needed to have, something else in their arsenal. And, I live by certain quotes. My team kind of makes fun of me sometimes for this, but start of 2024, I heard a really good quote that kind of exemplifies this really well. And for me, this is how it goes. I'm going to mess it up, but knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is understanding that it probably doesn't belong in a fruit salad. And what I feel about real estate in general is that there's so much knowledge on just about every topic, not just real estate, that knowledge misleads people into thinking that they're in this fast car and they're going to hit the 401 and they're going to be able to drive fast and get around because they got this great car that they're in. Not exactly. If you don't pick the right route, you're still going to be really slow and you're going to be stuck. So that's the way we try and help the conversation around, how to not make those kind of mistakes. So again, a reoccurring theme for us is, like, we look at 2024 as we do in every year, whether it was 2001, 2002, 2003, every single year systematically, our team looks at what is happening globally. So what geopolitical issues could possibly affect us? So obviously the war in Russia, Ukraine, the Israel conflict, Hamas thing. I mean, I can tell you that automatically, guys, I've seen it firsthand, because we help a lot of families that are in different communities. I can't tell you how many families on both sides of this conflict, because they're so worried, real estate and buying it and selling it is just not something that they're thinking about. And they're big communities. So all of a sudden, it just changes the way they think about how confident they are in the world. And I will tell you this, because I was in retail back in the 2001 at that time as well. When consumer confidence is high is when their fear is at the lowest. So if people stop, if they're fearing something, it will prevent them from figuring out what they need to do. And that might even happen to you as an investor. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious, but I got to tell you, the amount of times that the obvious, trips us up is crazy. We already know that, there's a lot of media stuff around the possible threat of a world war, and then the upcoming election between Trump and Biden. And this is another thing I'm going to say, guys. I always try and stay out of politics in the sense of I'm not a pick sides kind of guy. But I will tell you, if you want to be a good real estate investor, I would say that you have to not necessarily have an opinion about it, but you got to pay attention to it. It's no different than I don't have a really opinion if it's going to rain or sunshine. But if it's raining, I want an umbrella, and if there's sunshine, I might, pack some suntan lotion. The point here is that we're facing a lot of ups and downs this year, depending on what's happening in this world. So just keep that in mind, because we're looking at that. And what else is happening, right? So we look at in 2024, they're talking about interest rates coming down. Now, the Bank of Canada today stayed flat, so they didn't do anything. But I do want you to guys take a look at this graph. You can see how much buying was happening in 2020, 21, 22, and how quickly these rates went. What am I going to draw your attention to here is really simple. This is the one I'm paying attention to more than anything else. For all the people that got mortgages in 2020, 21, in that range, what happens when they renew? A lot of those mortgages are on 3, 4, 5-year terms. So over the next 12 to 18 months, I don't know how many people exactly, guys, it's a very big number. And those people might have signed on at 2%, and now they're renewing their mortgage at 4%. And I've done the math. You're not going to be able to hold on to all those properties. So we're taking a look at that. And that's something I'm going to encourage everybody on this call to do. Take a hard look at what's going to happen over the next 12 months between two scenarios, right? We got one scenario where we got a lot of buyers that didn't buy that are likely to jump in, and a whole lot of people that have bought that are sitting in homes that they likely might not be able to afford. Those two worlds are going to collide. It's mathematical certainty. That's just something that we need to know. So when we talk about what else are we looking at? Okay, well, at the beginning of January 1st, 2023, the Canadian government passed this, right? That non-Canadians could not buy property in Canada for 2 years. That number probably stunted 2023 as well, right? So you saw how many net in, students were coming, immigration, so forth. But if you can't buy, you're stuck. Okay, well, by 2025, anybody that couldn't buy in 2023 will be buying in 2025. So you got 2024 as a setup year to do some creative buying and selling, because by the time 25 hits, and a lot of those people that were on the sidelines are going to jump in, and I'm going to tell you again, mathematical certainty that it's going to have an impact. How big? That I don't have a crystal ball on, but I'll tell you that's something that our group is for sure paying attention to. And then this one just popped up, that the city is talking about a 10% hike in property tax in the 416. So what does that mean? Again, doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. They're trying to push more and more people into the 905. So all these kind of things, when people say to me, okay, Frank, what to expect in 2024, and I'm throwing a lot out there, guys, this is just like right off the top of our heads in the last 15 days of what our team, the brokerage, and all the realtors on this side are kind of looking at. And if you're a real estate investor, I won't give you a lot of guarantees in life, but I can guarantee you this for sure. If you ignore pivotal pieces of information, like what we're seeing here, it will hurt you in one way or another. So that's what we try and do for our folks, is say, okay, we're going to pay real close attention to this and figure out where we're going. I'm going to tell you that one of the things that I have seen, at least in the first 10, 15 days, and this is more on a personal level, our team had, I think, 3 properties that have been sitting at the tail end of 2023 with little to no action. And in the first 10 days of the year, we ended up selling those properties and have a ton of extra showings. So I turn to my clients and say, does that mean all of a sudden the Fallico group got real smart and we were really good at our job? No, we were benefactors of obviously the market shifting for us. And that's sometimes what I encourage real estate investors to look at too. There's another analogy I throw out. Then again, sometimes people make fun of this, but whether you're on the Cristiano Ronaldo side or the Messi side as one of the best soccer players in the world, when the soccer pitch is wet, their feet get wet too. So I give people that analogy, say, it doesn't matter if we're great realtors. It doesn't matter if we do a lot of great things. We have to be aware of what pitch we're on. And if it's wet and mucky, we're not going to be able to handle your listing in the same fashion that we would in a different market. So that becomes a pivotal conversation for those that are willing to get it, right? So
Frank,
yes, I'll stop there for a bit.
Yeah, just jump and give your voice a rest. You can grab a drink. One of the things that I know that many of our members, like hearing you talk, there is more bad news in the first part of your presentation than what investors would like to hear. The it is imperative. It is so important that as investors, one of the things that we do is that we start drinking our own Kool-Aid, and we think that over the last, because we've done so well. I mean, literally 4 years ago, if you bought a brick, you look like a rock star.
Yeah.
Times have changed, but we still pretend that we're still like that back then. And it is really, really important in this season to be really clear on what the bad news is and the effects of it. Because if we don't see it, we cannot prepare for it. I can guarantee you this, that if you look at the bad news really, really well, we can figure out a way that will work for you. That there might be pain, but it'll be less pain than if you just ignored it.
You know what, Niran? I love that you mentioned that, because that would have slipped my mind without you letting me know that. And because I'm such an optimist that sometimes I forget that the whole world doesn't think as optimistically as me. But I am going to say this, and I believe it with a lot of conviction. The worse the news is, the bigger your opportunity is. Like 100%. In times that are the most difficult globally is when the biggest opportunity as an investor, or whatever business you're pursuing for that matter, the harder it seems, the more people it's going to keep away. And if you happen to be one of the bunch that says, hey, you know what, I'm not going to let this bad news affect, the bigger the reward at the tail end. So while I agree, you know, it seems like obviously there's a lot of bad stuff out there. I'm looking at it like 2024, and I've said this to my team, they can vouch for it, maybe for the last 6-7 months. Guys, this is the time for us to be making our moves. Like right now is when we need to get like astute around what we're buying next, what we're going to do next, what should we do as a business, and so forth. Because that's precisely it. When bad news happens, a lot of folks run for cover, and then there's always those few leaders within that batch that says, you know what, no, I'm going to do something with this. And that really is kind of like a great separator. So I'm glad, Niran, that you brought that up, because that would have been one of those things that would have eluded me. So
perfect. So where to invest in Toronto? Take it away.
Yeah. So obviously I get a big question like what to do next. What I like to do is I always do case studies with the team. So the first thing I'm going to share with you guys, like this is a real case study that happened to a client that came to us after they made all these commitments. So a lot of times we get people, you know, I call our team almost a little bit like the emergency room. And sometimes people show up after they did something really bad to themselves. And then we kind of give them a sense of like, what could you have done? What should you do? And where are you going next? So in this case study, this is relatively recent. I mean, very recent, in fact, as you see this case study develop. This property was bought by a builder. Now I qualify this like, this is not just an overnight builder. This guy that with his team had done it a few times and had a lot of great confidence. The property is in North York. It's in Newton, nice neighborhood. Anyway, they bought this property in a bidding war, as you can see here, for 1.375, and they are into this property for about 1.4. Okay, so land transfer tax on top of that. That's where we get our math. So they bought it in 2021. Again, market was going gangbusters. A lot of great indicators in the market to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to make a lot of money here because market's going well. I'm going to buy this thing, and this is what they built. A gorgeous home. Now, this is all in hindsight, of course, like I did the research after the fact that they came to us, but they built this home, and at their cost, and keep in mind, I don't think you can even build at this price anymore, like a custom home as good as this one. But anyway, at their cost, I'm being conservative with these numbers, this home is 5,000 square feet plus. So $2.5 million couldn't even build you this home, but I'm Canadian, so I'm going to use a conservative number. So they're into this home at 2.5, and they bought it for 1.4 and change. And you can see, you know, taxes, like there's other carrying costs, and I'm not even throwing it in here just to keep the conversation simple before everyone, you know, loses their mind. But, you know, there's insurance, there's cost on the money, there's all that kind of stuff as well on top of this number. But I'm keeping the number really low here at 3.9 and change. This property, before they ever came to talk to us, was listed in 2023. Just to give you an idea of how much a market can impact even a very fast Ferrari that knows what they're doing. These guys have done it before, and they got caught. They listed this property 6 times, first at 4.3 million, then at 3.895, 3.6. You know, they ended up selling it at 3.150 ultimately. And by the way, they ended up selling it in the first week of January. So a good indicator again of why the market's shifting a little bit. But once you take commissions into account, they end up at 2.9 and change. And again, very rough estimate here on what they lost was close to $1 million. And if you look at the bottom here, their remarks, the seller was also offering a 3% mortgage on $3 million for 2 years because the person that bought it couldn't get a mortgage given the crazy rates. So when people tell me, okay, the correlationship between rates and what people can afford, that's how this home got caught. And they got caught real good. Now, if they were paying attention to the stuff that we were talking about at the top of the slide, then this type of investor wouldn't have gotten caught. Now, this is what you were saying, Niran, obviously, right? Like sometimes we drink our own Kool-Aid. If you talk to a builder that has 1, 2, or 3 pretty good transactions, they walk into this thing like they're rock stars. What I love, again, giving you a little, anecdote about how music used to be. I don't care how big you are, you're only as good as your last record. So if your last record's a flop, it doesn't matter that you think you're a rock star. Music was a really great equalizer and make you understand that you're only as good as what you're current at. And that's what I love about real estate. You can do 10 deals and lose it all on one. And this is one of those kind of examples of when people say, okay, and I can't tell you, I think Niran, on a once a week or every 2 or 3 weeks, whether it's friends, family, or otherwise, approach me and say, hey, Frank, we should get together. You know a lot. I'm a builder, this and that. Let's get in the flipping game. Okay. Let's just hold the horses here. So you can understand like the flipping game is a complicated game and it's not so easy peasy. On the flip side, when people say, okay, what can you be doing? Here's a case study number 2. And it kind of revolves around what I'm seeing in the rental market. 2021, you can see the average price for a bedroom sitting around $2,100. As you move into the third, fourth quarters, you can see that it was hovering around $2,400. And at the tail end of the quarter of 2023, rents at $2,633. And again, with all the net in migration, everything that I'm seeing, this number is only going up. 2 bedrooms went from 3,100 and change to 3,400 and change. Again, only going up. And that's what kind of leads me to when people say to me, okay, generally speaking, I'm going to tell you duplexes, triplexes are really popular, especially if you can get properties that are not officially duplexes yet, meaning like a bungalow that you might be able to convert, something to that effect, right? It's something that's a little bit more manageable, so you're not out there trying to manage, 800, 800 doors right out the gate. And again, I'm not too sure at the level that everyone's at, but I always give you like the pros and cons. If you look in the far left corner here, you can see that Halton, Peel, these are very low vacancy rates. Like even Toronto being at 1.2 and Durham at 1.5, okay, they're a little bit higher, but you can really just look at it between the taxes going up, all the stuff happening around the 416. If you're buying a property in the 905 and you want to start renting it out, you're just going to be fine, provided that you buy correctly from the beginning. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to show you an example. This is a property that I know intimately well. We bought it a little while ago, but when I got the property, you can look at this. It was a disaster. It didn't look very good. We spent about 60,000 and change to get it to look like these kind of pictures that you're seeing here. And this property is renting out for $2,950 upstairs, and we're getting 1,600 below 45, I think 1,650, something in that range. And those are conservative numbers. I could get more in the basement. The problem is that the lady's so good, I don't want to lose her. So I'm like, you know what? I'll take it on the chin for a few $100 a month just to make sure I have good tenants. Now, people might look and say, okay, Frank, where are these deals? I can't get them. Guys, this is at Islington and 401. It's Old Rexdale. I don't know if there's a lot of Torontonians on this call, but just as an example, when you hear Rexdale, there's a natural, I don't know if I'm going to go there, but Old Rexdale isn't like regular Rexdale. And I can tell you, all the net in migration that comes into the city, they are not prejudiced about these neighborhoods the way Torontonians are. So people don't come in from, all over the world and say, oh my God, I can't live in Brampton. Oh my God, I can't live, in Old Rexdale. Oh my God, I can't live, like Torontonians have a natural prejudice because we've been here. But when you have the amount of new people coming to our borders in our city, they don't have the same prejudice. And I can tell you there's a lot of good families that need a place to live that will come to Old Rexdale and give me good money and be stellar. When I tell you stellar, now, of course, you have to be really good at vetting them, but I'm going to tell you that don't allow your own prejudices about your own city dictate how you make money in this city. You have to keep in mind that we don't all share the same opinion, and immigrants for sure don't know the city the way we know it. And that's why I tell people, yes, I would love to have a property in Rosedale and rent it out for 10, 15,000 a month, 20,000, 80,000. But the real opportunities are where you think they might not be. Now, how do I know this? I'm going to give you an example. This property here, 29 Hatfield Crescent, is one street away from the one I just showed you. And this deal closes January 5th. And this person bought it for 700,000 and change. And if I show you the inside, it's not pretty. I don't know if I would personally live here, but this doesn't even need as much work as the one that I did on that one there. And conservatively, this one here ends up making about four grand and change a month, and would be cash flow positive if you put 20% down in that range. So again, I'm being very general here because like we don't do it quite this systematically when we're about to help somebody buy or sell an investment property. But I can tell you in the same market, we did really well with that cheap little bungalow versus that builder trying to do a $4 or $5 million flip. And I gave you two ends of the case study spectrum just to tell you that everything in between exists. And I'm gonna maybe pass around because I don't want to overextend my attention welcome, because again, I've been on these calls where it's like, you don't want people drifting off. But I just wanted to give you like a boom, 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 boom on how we think as a team and why the Real Estate Wealth Lab is connected to this kind of philosophy. It's like, we're not reinventing the wheel here, guys. These are all things that quality people in this industry look at. And yeah, and I'm open for discussion, questions, and whatever else we feel we want to get into.
Perfect. Frank, thank you very much. Can you go to the last slide for me, Frank?
Yes, sir.
If you want to take a screenshot of this, feel free to email us at info@realestatewealthlab.com. And I want to talk now. I'm going to come out. If you can stop sharing your screen, Frank, and we'll have a chat for a couple of minutes. First of all, thank you so much. That was filled with lots of information, useful information, and most importantly, curated information that actually paints a picture of what is happening in our world. What I would like to do is I have a couple questions, but I'm thinking that we might have some questions. So if you have a question, could you raise your hand digitally or throw it in the chat for me, and we'll bring you on. You can come on camera. If you feel shy, that's okay. We can hold your hand while you come on camera. If you still feel too shy, you can throw it in the chat. But keep your questions short and to the point if you have any. And while people are doing that, I have a question for you, Frank. The 50% drop in student visas, that's staggering. Because so the implications I see as a result of that I see is, one, we're going to have a decrease in rental, rents are going to drop, or it's going to affect either a slowing down or a decrease in rent. And I believe rents have dropped the last couple of months as well.
Yes.
That's one thing. I'll throw mine out and then you can comment and tell me if I'm out to lunch or not. Okay. One, I think it's going to impact rental amount, and where that is, on one side, that is good because it allows affordability. On the flip side, with interest rates being high, it is not good because we're already struggling to make a break-even property work or cash flow, because if rents drop and our mortgages are still high and our expenses are still high, I'm concerned. That concerns me. The thing that I see is more of a long-term vision. When you drop the students that come to Canada from another country, from India or in any other country, you're getting some of the best minds, and they tend to come back to Canada or stay in Canada, immigrate to Canada. Like I immigrated to Canada, but my dad first came here to do his master's degree in mathematics. Then he did his PhD in philosophy at McMaster University. That's what led to him being able to obtain a professor's position here and allowing us to immigrate here. My concern is the brain drain. We, as a country, when we drop 50% of the best students in the world, what is the impact, not now, but 5 years down the road? So those are the two things that are concerning me. And what do you see?
So for starters, the concerns are valid, like extremely valid. What I will add to it, and again, there's only the optimistic side of me that always kind of looks at is the glass half empty or half full, or the third one, which is it's probably half as big as it needs to be. But I will say that Toronto and Canada, but Toronto specifically, is one of the most tolerable cities on the planet. And when I mean tolerable, meaning we accept everybody generally better than most. So if you have, if you happen to be gay or you're not gay, it doesn't matter. You're going to find a community here. You're Muslim, you're not Muslim. You're Christian, you're not Christian. You're Jewish, you're not Jewish. You're Palestinian. Whatever you are, that community already exists in Toronto. So there's already a pull that from all over Canada for that matter. So if you're a kid in Sudbury and you don't fit in, you're going to fit in. You're going to find a community in Toronto. If you're somewhere in Halifax and you don't fit in, you're going to find a way of fitting in here. So the brain drain is real, but it's offsetted by the fact that it's such a tolerated city that we keep on pulling in talent one way or another. It almost like an equalizer wheel. So you might lose one, you gain one. You might lose two, you gain four. It's that kind of effect. It's what continues to draw that kind. Now remember, the category we're talking about, it's a significant one, but it's only one, right? Because you also have so many other groups that are in this city doing what they're doing. So on an intern perspective, yeah, you might look at it that way. The other part of it is what you said, the ones that are here, there's already a ton of those folks that are already here that haven't bought and might not be able to buy. So they're going to be longer term renters than we think. And then you know how immigration goes, because my parents are immigrants. They came to Canada when literally there was nothing here. And their idea was to work hard and go back to the homeland. That never works out that way, because you end up falling in love with somebody, right? You end up falling in love with somebody here. You end up making friends, relationship. Like at the time in your life when you are most connected, you're in this country. It's hard for anybody to walk away from those connections. And then you look at countries like, I don't have the exact numbers, but India, China, those are big numbers. I was trying to tell friends and family, like, I think China's at 2.7 billion. If literally 0.5% decide to want to buy somewhere, they can change the entire landscape of that country. I mean, we're only at 37, 40 million people here. There's cities in China that are bigger than our country. So if even a small percentage of the population decides to feel comfortable in Toronto, it will have long-term impacts all the time. So I'm very bullish on the long term. Of course, in the short term, you got to kind of pay attention to all these things. And the one thing that I know about paying attention to local things, we talked about global, national, and local. The one thing I notice is that the local one is the most volatile, because just as quickly as that ban comes in, it can be gone, right? Like, we see these things happen in real time and say, okay, what's the impact? By next year, I remember during COVID when the mayor came on TV and said, hey, don't worry, you don't have to pay for your rent. Like, people were losing their minds. But the thing is that all that stuff is somewhat temporary. And I kind of look at what are the more mid to long-term indicators that I should be more worried about? Because I don't think Canada ever becomes a country, and Toronto specifically, a city that doesn't welcome immigrants. I think it's just hardwired in our DNA. And I think while it might be temporary bans here, temporary, you can't buy, so forth, for politicians to look good to their constituents. But ultimately, that's why I'm bullish. I'm saying eventually all that has to come to pass, because people want to come here and it's not in our DNA to keep them out. I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong, but I just see, like, relatively speaking, and most guys on this call, most folks on this call, I'm going to say we're worldly in the sense that we've been to other cities. Toronto's pretty high in that welcoming department. You start going to some of the European countries, or the way America can be in certain things, and you can see that we tolerate quite a bit more. We're not perfect. I'm not going to say racism isn't out there and this and that. Like, no, I'm not saying we're that. But we are a lot better in the report card rating in that department than a lot of other major places in the world. And that's one of the...
Frank, thank you. Yes, in the class closing minutes, if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Just let me know digitally, or throw it in the chat. If somebody could just, Louis, can you just have a look at the chat? The other thing I just want to mention, I do want to mention, is that Frank, there's two types of investors that are sitting in my circle and in this group, in this crowd, in our meeting. One is the investor that says, I have access to capital, I'm waiting for the right deal. And this is a great time to be poised that way, because you can jump on deals and you can get them. And I think it's a great time in history. I think a lot of money will be made in the buys this year. There's another type of investor as well. And these are the investors that have properties, but now their expenses are exceeding their income. And I have conversations with investors almost on a weekly basis saying, I'm in over my head. If you are that second type of investor where you're feeling like you're in over your head, or you know what, let's do this. If you're in this call or listening to the recording, if you are feeling a little confused or a little, not confused, but maybe just apprehensive, why don't you book a call with somebody from our team, either Lewis, myself, Ken, Kyle. Like we will sit down with you for a 20-minute consult, and let's just do a complimentary. Lewis, is that all right with you? Perfect. Let's do a consult. So if you're feeling concerned, we're here to be a voice on your shoulder that's going to see how bad the bad news is and how to find you a pathway out of that. All right. So let me just, if you are interested, just email us at info@realestatewealthlab.com. If my team could just put that email in the chat for me, greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Annalisa. The Frank, any comments on that? If you are those two sections of investors, and I want to acknowledge that we're probably going to be about 5 minutes over.
Perfect.
Okay?
Yeah, and I'll be as brief and coherent on this as possible. So let's take the first one. If you're looking for an opportunity, I'm going to say there's some common denominators you can always look at. So we always look at properties where sellers are motivated but have been sitting for a while. That's usually, you can almost find that, they're not easy to find, but you can almost find that in any market anywhere, meaning a motivated seller on a property that potentially been sitting there and that you might be able to identify as an opportunity. The second one I pointed, I think, is a little bit more complicated, but I would say, like, we first look at if they're in over their head and they're getting a certain amount of rent. The first thing that we always look at is, are we able in some way or another improve the quality of either the tenant that you have or the property to get you a better tenant? Or, I mean, ultimately, we hate to have you sell your property because we don't believe in that necessarily. But if you do have to sell your property, we have a concept that, like, you know, you don't trade your gold for silver or your silver for bronze. We say, okay, you know, if we have to sell a property, then let's see if we can use that equity to get you the kind of property that does put you in a better cash flow situation. And we start looking at all parts of the GTA. Again, that is a very difficult question to answer because it's so nuanced, right? I mean, sometimes somebody's in over their head because they don't understand the landlord-tenant relationship well enough. Meaning, I was dealing with somebody that was trying to sell a property, and sometimes I'm like, you know, at Christmas, do you give them like a bottle of wine? Do you give them like a Tim Hortons gift card? Like, what do you do to make sure that that tenant is not a nightmare from hell for you that now has prevented you from doing X, Y, and Z or what have you? So, you know, we're in the people business, and tenants are people. So if you don't understand that they're your customers, like there's so many nuances in that. It's like when sometimes somebody's in over the head, we just systematically start going through the checklist of what they've done. Is it related maybe to the interest rate and the mortgage person that they're working with, that they're in the wrong kind of money structure deal around their property? As you know, Niran, we have these conversations. There's so many layers, and your suggestion of somebody getting on the call with you guys to help them understand, like, okay, if you're bleeding, if you're hurting, if you're doing something wrong, like, what are we talking here? Like, do you need a Band-Aid on your foot, or you need it on your finger, or do you have an earache? And I take like the medicine approach to solving problems. Like, if you go into a doctor's office and he gives you something without asking you a bunch of questions, you're going to be reluctant to take that medicine because you might have a foot problem and he's giving you something for your ear. We look at the transaction, like the human anatomy, which is, okay, where are we really got the problem, and then identify it. And that's why I say it's a little bit more complicated to answer in 5 minutes, but it gives you context of it.
Thank you so much, Frank. If you want to get in touch with Frank, send us an email and we'll make sure that that's connected for you. Lewis, any closing words? I know you're appreciate you coming in from Vegas. So I know you're at a conference.
No problem. Thank you, Frank. That was a fantastic call. I loved what you said about, being aware of our environment on a global scale, a national scale, and on a local scale. When we're doing things like this and being responsible and having accountability for a home purchase, whether it's for ourselves or investing in our family's future and wealth, being aware of these things at every level is important more now than ever before, because there are so many things going on. And unfortunately, unrest, it happens, and it's been happening for, as long as history's been recorded. So making sure you're having a conversation like that. And if you're hesitant about it, and Ryan made a great point about getting in touch with us, starting a conversation, maybe finding a different perspective on what it is you're doing, or, locations, and that is just, an extra step towards building that confidence and gaining more certainty towards making that step and taking the action forward, right? So fantastic presentation, Frank. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Frank, once again, thank you very much. Deeply appreciate your intelligence, your wisdom, and most of all, your directness and fused with optimism. So it is exactly not just the information we need, but you phrased it in the right context and nuanced it with the right tonality. So we are so appreciative of that. JM, did you put your hand? Oh, you were clapping. Sorry. JDP, I know you're clapping as well. So thank you very much. Put some love in the chat for Frank, will you? And
Merci beaucoup. Go, throw some French in there. Merci beaucoup to the group.
Perfect. Well, if that is it for our call today, I look forward to seeing you all on some of our members on our members call, and then next month for our REWL public call. If there's any way that we can be of help, please, if you are in this room, you are you've identified as part of being part of our tribe, our people, our fellowship. And we are grateful to be able to walk this with you. We are all investors at the same time, feeling the pain and hustling all at the same time. So have a great night. We will see you all soon. God bless.
Salute.